Okay, so today we're going to talk to you about Lewins' model of change, and this was developed by Kurt Lewin in 1958, and he's a humanitarian that thought that change requires action. And so he says that action requires that you look around your situation and really analyze the situation for all the possible solutions. This process requires 3 steps. The first is unfreezing, the second is movement, and then the third is refreezing. So we're going to talk to you about those today and give you examples from our own change projects. So, Caitlin?
So the first step is unfreezing, and that has 3 processes. These are disconfirmation, induction of guilt or survival anxiety, and the creation of a psychological safety. So for first, the disconfirmation is the dissatisfaction or frustration that comes from the challenges to our expectations and our hopes, and so we must accept that whatever we're doing is valid data and it's something that needs to change. So for me, I chose to stop biting my nails, and the lengths of my nails were kind of my dissatisfaction information, the data. So the second process is the guilt or survival anxiety, and this is induced by the feeling that if we don't change, our needs or our goals won't be met. And so for me, I really felt that if I did not stop biting my nails, it could look like I was unprofessional. So if I went into interviews or something, I may not get the job just because my nails look really bad and they look really short. And it says something about how I handle stress. So the third process of unfreezing is the creation of a psychological safety. So this is balancing out the uneasiness that comes from the disconfirming information with the psychological safety that allows you to change. And so in order to create this safety, I really just needed to build up my self-confidence and belief that I could stop biting my nails. So for example, I put sticky notes on my desk with meaningful quotes about how I could change.
So I'm going to talk to you more about the force field analysis, and this is a step-by-step process that you can really use at any time. We applied it to this change project, but it's beneficial in the workplace if you notice something's wrong, but you're not sure all the factors that go into it. By going through this process, it's really beneficial to get to the root of the problem. So the first step is to actually define what it is that you see as the problem. So in this sense, this is kind of Caitlin's explanation of unfreezing, the disconfirming data and survival anxiety. Those are things that are helping you realize what the root of that problem is. And so once you figure that out, then you decide what the change objective should be. So what is your desired end goal? What is the desired performance or rate that you want to exceed if you're in a workplace, maybe manufacturing? And then once you figure out what your desired performance is, then you determine what the driving forces are. So again, this is kind of what Caitlin was talking about, your survival anxiety. What is it that's making you want to change this particular problem? Then, once you do that, you have the motivation, but in order to be successful, it's really critical that you define the forces of the restraining forces or the status quo forces, so what's keeping you at that place right now. And by defining those, it's a lot easier to know how to address the problem and how to change from there. But that's often hard to decide what it is that's making you stay in the same place. So my change project was actually budgeting, and the forces of change were that I was broke and my bank account was quickly depleting. So that was definitely some survival anxiety. Coming up on the end of college, and we're going to need to learn to budget because there's no oops, I'm broke in the real world. That doesn't happen. You can't really recover from that. So I wanted to learn to do that, and that was my force for change. And the desired performance then would be that I budget, I maybe even have extra to save. That would be ideal. I'd like to retire one day. Then I had to analyze what the forces of the status quo were. And for me, a lot of it was I am recently 21 and I enjoy going out with my friends, but also I am a bit of a shopaholic. I love to get my retail therapy in. And on top of that, I really enjoy coffee, and you can get it just about anywhere on campus. So those were all things that, I could make a choice whether or not I wanted to do, but I was stuck in the mindset of, oh, I can do this. So those were just a few of the forces I identified, and then I used those to set my goals not to do. I set a limit of only 15 for entertainment expenses, whatever that may be. The next thing, I started drinking tea as well, because I realized that actually caffeine wasn't helping my skin, and so I bought tea at home and I could just use water, and those were just a few examples of things that I used. So now Nicole's going to talk about the bigger subject of movement.
So the second step in the Lewins change model is movement, and this is basically once a person is unfrozen and knows that they are motivated for change and needs to clarify and resolve their uncertainty. So basically this is a person being open to new information and being able to hear or see things that they previously weren't able to. The main key in movement is understanding that this is not an overnight process. It takes a lot of time and communication for you to be able to move, and I think this is the point in time where a lot of people begin to fail, because if the change doesn't come quickly, they begin to give up or go back to their old habits, and I think that's where the change process this semester has really helped the majority of the class, because it was a weekly assignment and we were on a schedule to stick with it, whereas in your normal life you might not be as stuck to something like a schedule. So in my change process, I decided to be more optimistic. I found that in everyday life I was being very negative about really small things, but it enveloped my whole life, and one small thing that I would wake up being negative about would make my whole day bad. And I realized that I needed to make the movement because I want to have stronger relationships and more solid friendships and a future career, and I want to be happy in my overall life. And basically, if I'm working so hard at Gonzaga and in my social life and I'm not getting anywhere with it because I'm negative, it just didn't seem worth it for me. So in the movement process, the second aspect is cognitive restructuring, and this includes 3 terms: semantic redefinition, cognitive broadening, and new standards of evaluation. Cognitive restructuring in Washington, for example, was the fact that marijuana used to be illegal and it used to be bad and have these negative aspects surrounded with it, and now it's legal. So we still have yet to see where that goes, but that's a great example of the movement that Washington has had. For semantic redefinition, it's learning a new definition of words or concepts and making new assumptions. So these are words that we knew already, but learning new definitions for those words. So a modern example would be the term gay. Normally, back in the past and back in the day, it meant being happy and joyful. Now that's a homosexual, male or female, or maybe used as a derogatory term. So it's a term that completely changed what it means to us, and we do this in the movement process. The second term is cognitive broadening, and this is learning a broader definition of a word or concept. So we talked about this in class. Diversity to some people only means race, but it can mean so many other things. It can mean sexual orientation, it can mean religion, socioeconomic standing. So a broader cognitive broadening for diversity is one that we talked about and that can definitely be used in the movement process. The third is new standards of evaluation. So this is learning new anchors for our judgment and comparison, and this shifts our judgment. We learn that the anchors we use for judgment and comparison are not absolute anymore, and that's where we see the biggest movement. So some effective measures of change that you can use in your movement process for me was role models. But the role models that I reached out to were definitely my best friend and my aunt. My best friend is very optimistic. She always sees the light at the end of the tunnel, has great relationships, is very popular, and just happy with her overall life, even with the small things. So I definitely reached out to her for advice and followed her trends and kind of acted how she acted, and I felt myself beginning to do the same thing. My second role model was my aunt, who is established, has a great career, great family, and just supplies the support to my overall family, and I think in the future I want to be like her. So I also reached out to her and asked her for advice and called her consistently just to talk about how I could change and be more optimistic. The second effective measure of change for movement is scanning for solutions. So this is seeing where you can implement the change and how you can implement the change. So Caitlin talked about how she uses Post-it notes for her change project. I did the same thing. To be more optimistic, I put very happy, friendly notes wherever I would see them regularly. So this was in my apartment, in my car, on my books, wherever I could see them to reiterate that I was in the process of changing and finding those solid solutions so that I could change. So the next step is refreezing.
All right, so the third step of Lewins' change model is refreezing, and this is really important in your change process because it takes your changed habits or activities and makes them into your everyday life and your everyday natural habits. In the workplace, this could be called your standard operating procedure, or Lewin calls it your status quo. It becomes your new status quo. So there's huge risks if you don't do the refreezing process. Basically, most of the unsuccessful change projects are unsuccessful because they fail to refreeze, and this causes them to get trapped in what's called a transitional trap, and it means that you have never actually reached the final goal, and a lot of times these people will revert back to their old habits and the change process will be for nothing. So it's really important that you go through the steps of refreezing. And the other thing that is really risky with this is if you don't refreeze, it's very hard to start a new change project because you don't have those original processes or habits as your status quo. You had already reverted back to. So it's hard to start a new change process if you don't refreeze. So my change project was just like Lauren's. It was doing a budget, and I had a few reasons for this. First of all, this semester was a huge transition for me because I was living off campus for the first time, so that creates a lot of extra costs that I've never had to cover before. Also, this is the first semester I didn't have a job, so I didn't have an active income or consistent income to set off my purchases with. And lastly, I was extremely broke from studying abroad last semester, so it's really important that I get my spending under control. Some of the problems that I had in the movement phase was just like Lauren, I bought coffee a lot, and so I started drinking tea or water and making it at home. I went out to eat with my friends a lot, so we started cooking dinner together at home and saving money by doing it all together. And as most of us can probably agree, alcohol is very expensive, so that became a toll on my budget. But start going to happy hours or sharing with friends, you make it work. But anyway, so now that I got through all those processes, I'm in the process of refreezing. And this is, you're ready for refreezing when you have stable or consistent habits. And in the workplace, this could be something like a consistent organizational chart where everything is staying the same, or consistent job descriptions where everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and it's not changing according to the activity or anything like that. In my change process, my stable conditions were the fact that I carved out a piece of my weekend to go grocery shopping, and I made lists and plans for my meals that week. So I really knew that I wasn't going to make any purchases just because I wanted to at the moment. I had a plan, and so that really helped. I also knew that I was ready for refreezing when I was consistently inside my budget or under my budget for the week, or not making a lot of purchases that I didn't need to make. So I was ready for refreezing. So success for refreezing requires really active involvement by everyone involved in the change process. This includes, in the workplace, it would include managers or employees involved in the change process. In my project, it means that I need to stay actively involved. And I knew that during breaks, I wasn't really actively involved. I wasn't actively thinking about all of the changes that I needed to take advantage of. And so I needed to continue to think about that all the time. And that's part of my refreezing process, is to continue actively being involved in it. So the factors for change, the factors for refreezing there are 4 of them. And the first one is to anchor your change by identifying the factors for support and your barriers to entry. So that is the force field analysis that Lauren talked about earlier, making sure that you know what your forces for change and barriers are. So for me, my forces for my supportive forces was definitely my mom. She always talked to me about options and gave me tips for saving money. And she also was just there for support whenever I needed it. And definitely a barrier for my refreezing is going to be the fact that I'm going to be starting a new job and I'll have a consistent income again, so I need to don't get carried away with, having money again. So that's definitely a barrier that I need to keep in control. The second is sustaining your change through reward systems. And, for me, that would be maybe splurging on a purchase. If I've saved a lot of money and I've been looking at something for a long time, that new pair of shoes that I gotta have, maybe I can splurge if I'm really doing well in my refreezing and these habits are becoming really natural for me. And the third one is consistently, regularly reviewing how you're doing. So for me, budgeting and consistently looking at it, making sure that I'm staying in budget and not going crazy on purchases. And the final one is celebrating when your change project is going well. So definitely just understanding and affirming all the employees if it's in a workplace, or for me, just being happy and excited that I am staying in budget and maybe making that splurge purchase or celebrating with my friends with a big dinner or something that's really it's good for morale to be celebrating things like that. So those are the processes for refreezing.
So now that we've talked about unfreezing, movement, and refreezing, as well as giving you an example with the force field analysis, we hope that you can take this process and apply it to your own lives and then continue it on into the workforce once you've graduated. And it's really beneficial as a whole. So we hope that you've learned a lot and enjoy the rest of your day.
Guys, we really don't want to do this.
That's okay, it'll be fine. We'll do it.
That'll be fine. Did you get new shoes?
Yeah, aren't they cute? They're so expensive. It's okay.
Woohoo!
What'd you guys do last night?
Spent way too much at the bar last
I hear
night.
you, girl.
Stop chewing your nails.
Sorry.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
I just checked my bank account. There's money in there.
That's awesome. I just bought this blazer for $2.
What? I just got a manicure.
Guys, I'm so glad